Chez Ru is the only place to be. Chez Ru, through your speakers weekly. Chez Ru, get your liquor and unwind. Chez Ru, then you'll never be behind. Welcome to my place. I'm doing things a little bit different today. I don't have an in-studio guest because a few weeks ago, I had the pleasure of curating and hosting a couple of panels with some great guests at the African Diaspora Summit produced by OMEC, an Amsterdam-based organization committed to reimagining the bicultural experience globally. Tracing your roots and knowing where you come from is an issue most people of color in the diaspora deal with on a daily basis. So therefore, also one important for me to shine a light on this week. I hereby present to you the segment called My Ancestors Taught Me. Enjoy. All right, now let's get it popping. I reached into my bag of homies and selected a handful who continue to creatively inspire. I'd like to start by welcoming Dana Saxon, the founder of the organization Ancestors Unknown, dedicated to devising curriculums to equip youth with the tools to trace their own roots.
What's up, Rudii? I'm so honored. Thank you for having me.
The honor is all mine.
Oh, that's so sweet.
Next, we got Lynnee Denise, a self-proclaimed audiophile and scholar who teaches at Stanford and UCLA when she's not globetrotting while being unapologetically Black.
Thank you for inviting me. It's wonderful to be in the company of these people.
For sure. Thank you for coming. I want to welcome Lisanne Charles, a poet and community leader who's currently active representing her island of Saba within the Dutch political party Article 1, better known as Bijeen. Thank you for joining us at some point. We'll sneak her in when she gets her technical situation sorted. Last but not least, we got spoken word artist and all-round industry vet. Give it up. Wow. I say give it up like we're about to clap. Please welcome Lamar Black Ice Manson.
I just want to say that you're incredibly blessed to have me. I'm so glad that you were fortunate enough to get me and my very astute opinion on this very necessary platform. You're welcome.
Because without you, there is no us, really.
Yeah, I mean, you're welcome.
Yeah, no. Thank you.
I'm absolutely bullshitting.
Where is the mute button? No, I'm just playing. No, thanks all for being here. So, I just want to get started, when was the last time you were around 100 plus Black people gathered with the sole purpose of uplifting each other? How long ago was that?
I mean, I can't remember being around 100 people.
Right, that's what I'm like 100 people, like, man,
right.
100 people.
But
yeah,
that's a lot of people.
Honestly, though, specifically Black people, I can't remember the last time that quantity would be nice though.
But also with that common goal of really just like helping and just trying to seek inspiration. It's like that element as well,
The closest to it was the Isley Brothers Earth, Wind and Fire versus gathering.
That counts for sure. So
Unfortunately.
Welcome to the OMEC Summit. What was the point in your life when you said, man, fuck it, I'm gonna dip and move? Like, what was that point?
Mine came in 2011. I was already pretty comfortable with traveling, and I had been spending summers abroad, living in Ghana, and I stayed in Greece for a summer. So I had experiences being away from the US, but in 2011, I was living in New York at the time, and I was just like really unhappy in my job and just generally not feeling like things were progressing the way I wanted to. I'm not a fan of the United States in general, so there was nothing like feeling like I had to stay. I didn't feel stuck in any way, so it was just the motivation. Let me find a new life, let me restart. So then I just started exploring what my options were, and I landed in the Netherlands. I did a master's program at the University of Amsterdam.
I want to say that quite honestly, my experiences abroad began with my relationship with music and just having curiosity, particularly listening to a lot of Black UK soul, reggae from the UK, and just being like, what's up with Black people over there? Like what's and obviously sharing the English language, similar social conditions, major curiosity. So it went from music to like reading Black British artists, or rather scholars, Stuart Hall, Claudia, Jones, Hazel Carby, and then being like, I need to go there. So I went to the UK in search of Black music, and it felt easy for me to be there. And I agree with Dana that I was just like, for me, there was always something a lot more interesting than America's ethnocentric understanding of itself as a sort of singular force in a global world. So I was just interested in learning about people's migration patterns. And I started coming to Amsterdam in 2013. And then I started spending summers here when America showed its ass in this new way. And by new, I just mean this sort of focused view that we all have on America as just a violent force, the violent force it has always been. The pandemic amplified what it is and gave me a different kind of reason to have a plan B, to have an actual escape route. And because of my relationship with Amsterdam, it made sense. And the community that I built in Amsterdam, it made sense. So I'm actually in Amsterdam seeking a certain kind of safety from the American machine.
That's deep. You feel, oh, I'm glad we could provide the necessary bunker space.
In 2015, like Love popped off, and it was like the perfect storm. My son was just graduating school, and I was coming out of I thought that I was coming out of a transition. I didn't know that I was actually moving into the transition. But here is where I feel, most myself at. It was quite humbling getting here. Like it was the challenge. I was up for the challenge of it, and yeah. So, but obviously the other night and day differences: healthcare, education, just the fact that my face is not the enemy. At 3:30 in the morning, I can stumble home from the Bible, and I ain't got to worry about getting stuck up. I ain't got to worry about being killed by the cops. It's not a police state. I always tell my homies when they come over here, the immediate difference is you don't know what it's like to not live in a police state until you don't.
It sounds like you gonna be here for a while. It's a trip, when I listen to other folks that migrated here from the States, like I'm always the only one that's over Amsterdam. It really trips me out why that is. Cause I'm listening to y'all talking, I'm like, yeah. I'm ready to go. But enough about me. Dana.
Yes, ma'am.
So I want to know what prompted you to start Ancestors Unknown while in the Netherlands?
All right.
And also just a follow-up question that you can attach to your response. How did you navigate the natural level of ignorance and resistance that comes along with trying to convince white folks to let you educate Black people?
My quick answer to that is you got to trick them. You got to make them.
No, so quick.
Well, let me start with why I started Ancestors Unknown in the Netherlands, and then I can kind of come back to how I tricked them. But the thing that was going on with me personally when I moved was I was discovering my own ancestors at the time. I was like becoming addicted to family history research. Part of the catalyst for it was being so unhappy in New York, and I was looking for an escape before I moved. And I started researching my family tree, and it started becoming like a personal revolution. Like all of the discoveries I was making and all of the questions I was answering and all of the frustrations that I felt as a young person, feeling like, okay, there's no way for me to learn about where my ancestors come from because I descend from survivors of slavery. We've been deprived of access to our family history knowledge, our pride, our identity. I had all of these frustrations. And then I started doing the research and actively taking control over my family narrative. And then that was just like, it blew me away what I could do as an adult. And so I was thinking this way when I moved to the Netherlands, right? And then when I said I went to school, I did my master's there in sociology. I started researching what's the significance of family history knowledge for people who descend from survivors of slavery. And when I was looking at that, was not just specifically for Black Americans, obviously. I was looking at that as it related to people in the Netherlands, people primarily coming from Suriname and the Dutch Antilles, had a very similar experience to what we experience in the United States, where we don't have access to our histories because of the disruptions of colonialism and slavery, right? So I was asking these questions over there, and I started taking some people into the archives. I've made, a number of connections through NINSE and other organizations that were working with local Black communities, and just started, asking questions in the archives, figuring out how the same questions that people had there that we have in the United States, how can we start answering these questions together? How can we support each other in this effort? And then that was the origin of Ancestors Unknown. It started planting a seed. How can I do this for more people, and specifically for young people? And so then I just developed I shouldn't say just, I worked really hard to develop a curriculum, and the curriculum is in two parts: family history research and other untold history. So this is where the tricking part goes in. So when I introduce Ancestors Unknown, I'm saying to schools primarily, we need to introduce young people to their histories. We need to teach young people who they are. We need to encourage them to feel proud about their personal stories. We need to encourage them to share each other's stories and learn from each other and their own histories, et cetera, and give them control and power over their own narratives. And at the same time, we need to let students see the context of their ancestors' lives. We need to see what else is not being taught in the classroom that is related to our ancestors' experiences. And classrooms in the Netherlands, classrooms in the UK, where I am now, classrooms in the United States, these classrooms are super diverse. And if we're only teaching Eurocentric histories, we're not teaching the full story. And the students are not seeing themselves, their stories in context. So that's what I tell schools. We got to teach the whole context. We got to teach the whole story. We got to make sure our young people feel represented and feel seen and feel like they are a part of history. They are writing history also for the future. They are relevant. That's like the biggest message. Our young people are relevant, as are their histories. So that's how, schools are starting to reflect on that, and they're starting to ask these questions. How can we meet the needs of our increasingly diverse classrooms? And that's the approach I'm pitching to them. What I'm really trying to do is get to the point of this revolution that I'm trying to start, is get in through school districts and making sure that Ancestors Unknown curriculum is just broadly available and not just like piece by piece, but I'm starting small.
How do you incorporate the hey, y'all started slavery factor into it? Like
they know they did that.
How did that come to the curriculum?
But you know what? That at this point, it's not the focus. Our purpose is really to highlight what Black and Brown people did, right? Like our stories, and not what they did to us. If that.
But isn't slavery one of the reasons why Black people have to trace their ancestors to begin with?
Absolutely, absolutely. And well, I mean, we all have to trace our ancestors, but slavery and colonialism are the biggest points of like the disruption, right? And that's why it's a challenge for us. Everybody, else, I shouldn't say everybody else, but a lot of other people have freer access to further generations back, but we have these disruptions, and it's very violent indeed. So we do explain that there are reasons why there are disruptions. There are violent disruptions to our histories, but let's take ownership of it, and let's do the research to find our ancestors, or let's try our best to break down those walls that have been created by those disruptive histories. I prefer to focus on, for example, one of our first lessons for the history topics is rebellions in the empire, talking about the UK. So we're talking about the resistance movements more than we're talking about the enslavement of our people, and really giving young people a sense of empowerment, that it wasn't all victimization. It was just a matter of giving us the space and the power to take our own agency back. This is a tough topic, but I don't make it the focus of Ancestors Unknown. I try to make it more positive.
Yes, I want to integrate my response by thinking with or acknowledging the importance of Dana's work, because like I just really want to sit with the importance of that. And because it happens to be directly related to my life right now, because I was afraid to ask the questions of who my ancestors are, because my family members, as in my grandmother, even my mother, actually got caught up in foster care systems, which creates an even more fragmented history. So I never asked the question of what my grandmother's full name was, what my grandfather's full name was, who my great grandparents were. I just never asked the question, assuming that I wouldn't discover this. You know, I appreciate Dana talking about that the curriculum moves away from focusing on trauma narratives to talk about ancestry. Because the moment I asked myself a question for the first time while I was sitting in my Amsterdam living room, like who my ancestors were, I actually was able to track my ancestors down sitting in the Netherlands. So I just want to give a shout out to Matthew Gaines, who was my great great grandfather. And what is amazing about Matthew Gaines, who I just encountered, like I said 2 weeks ago, is that he ran away from the plantation 3 times. He spoke 3 different languages. He became a minister. He became an advocate for public education. And he was known to not take shit. He ran away from the plantation multiple times. That's who I'm walking with. And the self-esteem on that joint is huge. So thinking about the way that children will be empowered with this information through this curriculum is not a game. I am a full-on adult pushing 50, and I'm trying to tell you my self-esteem was affected by learning, you know, these ancestors' names and learning who they are beyond trauma, learning how they were built to resist.
But one thing I do want to go back to is the moment, Lynnee was sharing, discovering her ancestry, but at the same time also like how in the moment, the passion was also just rising in her. I saw you get a little emotional, Dana. You wiped your eye a little bit. Was that not you? Was that just coincidence?
No, I'm like a little emotional. If I wasn't on camera, I would have been all out bawling. I'm even going to start crying again, just thinking about the memories of it.
But I want to tap into that. I want to know what that did.
Yo, I feel so. First of all, Lynnee, thank you for sharing that story. And Lamar, I agree. Like we all have this feeling of this, like we can't find our ancestors, but I feel so connected to all Black people for this reason. Like we are done so wrong for this. And I just yearn for everybody to have that feeling, that connection to at least one person in our past who got us to where we are today. And it is such an honor to learn about an ancestor, whether they were a freedom seeker or not. It's a icing on the cake when they're a freedom seeker and somebody who's like a badass that you can, spread those stories. And his story needs to be told more and more. So I'm so excited that you can do that for him as well. So yeah, it just makes me just feel so excited for Lynnee, specifically for us as Black people, that we can make these discoveries, and for our ancestors whose names are finally being spoken. This is what we should be doing.
Yeah.
Yes. All right. So I want to rewind the tape a little bit, because you've been pretty determined to like forge your path on foreign soil. But I want to go back to the moment where you first discovered your passion. In essence, the passion that led you to the career you are now or presently trying to discover.
I discovered that fire in me, or the desire to do something differently. Actually, it's related to travel still. I was 16 the first time I went to Ghana. I spent 5 weeks in Ghana for a summer. And that was when it was like a, summer program when they send American kids to like do volunteer work for the Africans. But I was really just trying to like spend time on the continent and have an opportunity to learn about. At that point, at that time, I was identifying as an African. So I thought, I want to spend time on the continent. I want to learn about my people, where I come from. And as a naive teenager, I was, excited for people to like welcome me home when I arrived. But yeah, that didn't happen immediately. And it was like a real moment, or like, that was like the onset of a lot of questions about my identity and what did it mean to be a Black American specifically? What did it mean to be a part of a very large diaspora of African people who who am I in this puzzle? It's like the seed was planted at that point, and that meant that I had to pursue answers to those questions basically for the rest of my life. And like that was I'm still trying to figure out a lot of those questions, but I feel like those seeds were part of the development of Ancestors Unknown and the work I'm doing and the travel, you know, my lifestyle of living abroad, all of it pretty much started then.
Go ahead, Lynnee.
I want to say, Rudii, that you're actually an amazing moderator. I really appreciate your questions and your humor.
Oh,
It's
thank you.
a refreshing break from some of the Zoom situations I've been in for the last.
I second that emotion. You're pretty dope.
Quickly, when I really think about, and you talk about rewinding childhood moments that kind of shaped who we've become today, like for me, it was about like memorizing Houdini's 5 minutes of funk. And then I took that memory to school and battled people, even though it was other people's lyrics. I was just like, so then I was on a mission. So then I was like, you know what? I'm about to remember 20 lyrics, 20 battles, go to the schoolyard and be like, I'm ready. Fat Boys, MC, like, you know, like I memorized those songs. My whole life just became centered around not just Black music as a form of entertainment, but as a place to start an important line of questions about who Black people are, period, which is at the core of my work. You know, I use the conceptual framework of DJ scholarship to think about Black music in a critical way. And to, when I say in a critical way, think about Black music as being a soundtrack for our experiences here since the 17th century. Also, Black music is a way of connecting with other folks in the diaspora. So it was music. And then, so, you know, by the time I'm 15 years old, I'm walking around with hundreds of songs in my head memorized. And then I was like, wait a minute. So what you're saying is that my mind is a library. Like I'm holding albums, songs, histories in my head. Eventually I became an educator. Eventually I started lecturing and working with organizations and building curriculums around the importance of Black music as an analytical tool that we can use to understand American history and Black American history in particular.
Okay. I want to direct a question to Lysanne. So I'm gonna combine it a little bit to something that I had asked the others, and then I want you to then segue into the question that everyone just answered. So to recap, so for the others, one of the angle that I was approaching it at is like, you know, being surrounded by Black people in your communities in America, and then coming to Europe, and then dealing with, you know, assimilating into this culture. Correct me if I'm wrong. The island of Saba is predominantly Black, right?
It's 50% Black, 50% white.
Oh, okay. All right. So
yeah, but St. Martin is like, so where I also lived on St. Martin, that's more predominantly Black. And with a smaller population of white people.
In addition to the whole like racial thing, as a LGBTQ activist, I imagine you face a different kind of problem that is not necessarily directly race related either, that like compounds on it over there, right?
Yeah, it has to do with race, but really it has to also do with nationality. So for example, the islands of the Dutch Caribbean, technically we're Dutch, right? Regardless of whether we come from predominantly Black with, you know, a greater or equal white and Black population. But there's that extra dynamic also of being Caribbean Dutch versus European Dutch. And the fact that the Netherlands refuses to address its legacy, well, first of all, refuses to address its colonialism, and then refuses to address the legacy of the colonialism, which has to do with nationality and language, and then also with sort of like the relics that it left behind, like qua LGBT issues and whatnot. So indeed, like, you know, like when I was in the Netherlands, I felt like I was freer to express myself as an LGBT person. But definitely there was so much racial things that you couldn't address, because the minute you brought it up, people in the Netherlands was like, no, what are you talking about? There's no racism here. There's, you know, there's none of that. And now I'm beginning to hear that it's changing. So they're beginning to be a little bit more willing to have those confrontational conversations. But then, like, when I was home, in particular on St. Martin, but not so much, you know, you also face the additional tensions around queerness that I didn't necessarily face in the Netherlands, maybe once in a while, but not on the level that I sort of faced it on the island. Even there, though, there's a conversation that must be had kingdom-wide about how we address those issues. And then I also just want to touch on something, because when I was listening to Dana speak, like it really moved me, because I also teach Caribbean history. There's a lot of like sort of history being retrieved on Sable, but only like for the most part a history of white Sable. And I'm like, there's a whole different, like a whole other story that is we're losing it very quickly, because a lot of the elders are sort of passing on. And so that's why like I worked very hard with my grandmother to write 2 books, so two of her memoirs, so that also that story and those people, like she mentioned a lot of different names of Black people on the island who are important to the progress of Saban culture, of society in general. So I felt like it was important to give those ancestors also room to be and to breathe on Sable, and that their memories continue. And then Lynnee was also saying something, about her ancestors.
You could tell it's been building up inside of her to say all this. Get it out, girl. Thank you. Recap.
Like I feel like on Sable, other than your, like, let's say your great grandparent, if you were old enough to know them, and thankfully I was old enough to know my great grandmother, like you don't really know a lot about your people, who they were, or what they contributed to the island. And so like my grandmother asked me to do like a family search of our lineage, and there were like so many names and so many stories that then I got from her about those people, that I feel like like even the fact that I'm a poet, that I love reading, I love writing, like it's a gift actually from my great grandmother and her mother, who also like the first great grandmother that I know, that she couldn't read, and she learned to read at like 40. So I feel like like there's so much work that we have to do, that I love this conversation. So
That's really dope. I'm really happy that you were able to join us in whatever capacity, because I think that I was very intentional about who I asked to be in this conversation. So I'm glad that you were here. To add on to this whole ancestor conversation, someone from the audience named Zineb has a question. What are ways and things you do that make you tap into the power of your ancestors on a daily basis?
That's such a lovely question. I, for one, speak their names as often as possible, obviously among the people that I know by name. I've also made an effort to print as many photos that I can find of ancestors. Some of them I didn't know before I started my research, so it's not like you have to always have a database of existing photos. Sometimes they come out in the research. Speak with them. I think that one of the things that we don't realize often is that the ancestors are communicating with us and giving us messages, and we're often just so focused on our daily grind and everything that we need to get done on our to-do list. But sometimes there are messages that are coming through that we just need to be quiet and listen to and reflect on. So I do try to have those conversations and understand exactly what messages are trying to deliver.
I think to add to that, someone in the audience named Akua said, you could connect to your ancestors via spiritual practices through lucid dreaming. Is that similar to?
Yeah, I guess that is essentially what I'm
saying. I like
saying.
how the audience seems to be very in tune with this conversation. So I really feel like we're at a family reunion. So I hope you're feeling the love down there, or well, not down there because you're not beneath us, but you get what I mean. Lynnee.
So yoga has become a daily part of my life. And I understand why so many Black people, particularly in the 60s and the 70s, jazz musicians, folks like Rosa Parks, Alice Coltrane, were like attracted to yoga as Black people, because the exercise of breathing is something that is a little bit of a prayer when you live in a place where folks have to remind institutions that breathing is a right. And although I don't enter my daily practice thinking about America's fuck shit, what I'm interested in for Black people is what it means for us to exhale. And the importance of doing that work, I think, is connected to our ancestral lines. And I also want to say that ancestry for me is not solely linked to my, I guess, genealogical makeup, but also thinking about certain guides that I feel like I walk with and that I honor daily through some kind of candle, sitting quiet breathing practice space, and also agreeing with Dana around like, now that I know these names, saying those names.
And for me, especially because I feel a particular connection to my great grandmother, so Adelaide. So I actually speak to her sometimes, and just because I feel like this connection. And I also write. So I write a lot of poems about them, a lot of stories of things that I've heard. I'm busy with a historical novel, and so I feel like in those ways that I definitely continue to connect to them. But also I feel like, like when I have to really make decisions, sometimes I really think like, okay, I think about their legacy. What do I know about them? What do I know about the things that they've done? And then I incorporate that into how I'm feeling and just into my general vibe. So for me, it's very much just trying my best to be mindful of the fact that they are there and that I feel surrounded by them, and to honor that commitment.
Okay. I want to know, how do the arts, whether it be music, books, or theater, influence your own sense of identity and also the way you teach those that you teach? Did y'all hear me? Like, I'm sorry, is this on?
You ask really dope questions, bro. So like you don't ask questions that you like. I'm sure we used to just having those generic interview questions. You asking like for pieces of our souls. We're not used to giving up that.
It's a safe space, guys. Would you like to answer it? I mean, Stanford and UCLA is pretty big time. I mean,
was it directed?
It's for everyone. I mean, you guys are, listen, Dana has been articulating how she teaches and how she does the trickery. So y'all got to fill in y'all share of.
So I think that it's interesting because I've been thinking about the syllabus as a mixtape and really thinking about what it means to put together seemingly unrelated text, multiple text, media text, musical text, literary text to drive home ideas, topics, questions for students. And so I'm pulling from a similar source. I'm literally like digging through multiple crates, and sort of putting those findings on the syllabus and having these extensive conversations that are rooted in my DJ practice. It's an investigative practice designed to create a collage of ideas and sounds to move a dance floor. In this case, the dance floor is the classroom. And I really do engage my students looking for a certain kind of call and response energy. Like I approach the classroom like a DJ, like throw your hands in the air if you understand what I'm saying. You know what I mean? Like
just waving like you just don't care.
And they be like, and they understand the language because so it's like
I want to take that class.
It's a pedagogical process rooted in Black musical aesthetics.
That's dope, Lynnee. That's dope. Lamar, do you have a certain specific approach when you're doing master classes?
I ask for the truth. That's what I for particularly for what for my craft of poetry, spoken word. So yeah, I ask for the truth. I think at times it's a double-edged sword because I'll have some young ladies or young men who have gone through some very traumatizing things in their life, but that's also where the art is. So there's this part of me that is always kind of remorseful that I have to ask them to go there, and not necessarily always in misery, but in that deep honesty is where the art is. So that's what I ask from master classes and demand from writers in general. I'm a fan of lyric, I'm a fan of fine woven words, Rakim, Kendrick Lamar, Black Thought, Big Daddy Kane, like I'm very into, but then also Leonard Cohen, Kafka, so I'm very into very interwoven words, but I'm more into honesty.
Gotcha. So Dana, you're not an artist in the traditional sense. Well, maybe you have a secret talent that you want to share. the skill set of like, adaptation and stuff like that. Do you have like a unique style of conveying the message? I mean, you did mention the trickery, but that to me is like the sales pitch to get you in the door. But I'm talking about how you connect with the students yourself. Like, is there a specific method that you feel works best?
Yeah, great question. I think that I ask them to be the thinkers and the creative ones. I mean, basically thinking about what Lamar and Lynnee are saying, I want them to be the artists. I want them to be the ones who are expressing themselves creatively and giving them a sense of ownership over their learning. So the Ancestors Unknown lessons are always, like in the Netherlands, in the US, we've done this as well. And now launching it in the UK, the intention is always to make the students the drivers of the research projects, the topics that we're discussing in the history lessons, like which ones are relevant, which topics are most relevant to these students, so that they feel a sense of ownership of it. And then we ask them to express their family history story, whether it is I think it's a really great point that you made, Lynnee, about the biological or the genealogical connection. It's not always a biological relationship. We emphasize, I'm getting a little bit off tangent, but it's important to say, like, we emphasize that it's not a biological relationship necessarily that you call family. Family is something that's defined by everybody themselves. So that's the first point of the students having agency. They take ownership of who their family is, who they're researching, whether it's a member of their community, somebody who's had a big influence on them, or is it a grandparent, and so on. So giving them that ownership. And then at the end of the day, at the end of the research project, how are you going to tell that story? How are you going to express it? It's not just a template family tree. Like, we're often in school given a box to fit in and told that you have to draw between those lines, but Ancestors Unknown is meant to give the students the space to express their creativity. My family story doesn't look like a tree. It looks like a film, or it looks like a song. It looks like a poem. So yeah, it's really just giving them, I'm saying the same thing, ownership and agency.
No, it's cool. No, I think you guys, there's certain things you got to underscore and repeat because it's significant.
I want to say a little something though, because I want to state the fact that the reason why teaching made sense to me is because it is in fact a performative art. And so actually I think that Dana, and also the creation of a curriculum is a work of art. It is not, I mean, like, the creativity, the improvisation it takes, the flexibility, the investigative piece, these are all part of an artistic process. And so I do think, actually, and that's not to be like, Dana, you an artist too. That's not what the vibe was. The vibe was like, no, but you are, and this is a performative art to connect, and or the performativity of the creation of a curriculum.
For me, when I teach, it's really about asking people if they're willing to be seen. Because when you're creating something, it's about really going deep and being willing to be raw and to be seen. So for me, that's one of the first steps that I take for people, is asking them and saying, this is safe space, but are you willing to show up in this space? Because that's also important.
Thank you so much for adding that. I just want to take the time to thank my guests. I want to thank Dana. I want to thank Lynnee. I want to thank Lamar. I want to thank Lisanne. I'm really happy, y'all answered my call. It really means a lot. Y'all didn't even really hesitate, and I appreciate that. I just want to tell you that right now.
Thanks so much, Rudii. This was super fun.
So yeah, thank you. You're always a dope shit, Rudii. Yeah, I appreciate it.
Yeah, impressive, Rudii, I have to say.
Yeah, because I'm always joking. Yeah, you've never even seen my serious side. I know.
Right. Like I was thinking, oh wow, this is like a whole different Rudii. Like, like serious questions, and which is cool.
Well, I feel like you guys have, you've done a lot and are doing a lot. And I think, the jokes are gonna come because it's part of my personality, but I feel like it's also important to, really highlight what y'all are doing, So I admire y'all. Y'all are inspiring.
Dope idea. Thank you.
Chez Ru, through your speakers weekly. Chez Ru, get your liquor and unwind. Chez Ru, then you'll never be behind. I want to know you. Find me on Instagram and YouTube. Chez Ru, CHEZRU. Follow, subscribe, invite your mama and your tribe, baby.